Food is not fuel. Hi, I'm David Brown from Idaho BMI. I'm a physician and bariatric surgeon. I used this phrase, this concept many years ago, 10 years ago, 12 years ago with the patients. Food is fuel. And I think the value in that is that, okay, yeah, it's more than enjoyment and pleasure. It's more than a coping mechanism. But I'm at the point now where I think that statement's totally wrong. Food is not fuel. Thank you for joining me. In this video, we will go over why food is not fuel. At least it's a lot more than fuel, and we are largely misdirected in our way of thinking on nutrition and medicine and obesity and diabetes. So the body's not a furnace. We are not simply an entity into which fuel is dumped or inserted into, and we burn that fuel. We're far more complicated than that. That's obvious to everybody. Think of a warehouse. I like analogies. Here's one. Think of a big warehouse, and you're the manager. You're in charge of inventory. There's one door to this big warehouse. You're at the door, and you've got an electronic scanner. And everything that comes in, all the inventory that comes in, you scan it, and it tells you exactly where it goes in the warehouse. Everything leaving the warehouse, again, you scan it, and you're able to account for things. And in this way, you are able to keep meticulous track of what's in the warehouse. Imagine your scanner, your electronic scanner breaks, doesn't work. And material, inventory product comes in, you scan it, doesn't work, so you just say, put it over there, I'll remember. And same thing with product leaving. You just try to remember, make a mental note. It doesn't take very long until you have no idea what's in your warehouse. Well, the human brain is absolutely an incredible manager of inventory. Astonishing. It's very good at keeping track of how much fuel we have stored, how much we've eaten in the last 7 days. But when we consume something that is not found in the natural world, it's as if the scanner has broken. It doesn't register, and it confuses the brain and the nervous system, and that is when we run into problems. Here's a good example. In the last couple of years, there's a study published in which these individuals, these people, over the course of 10 days, they were given 7 drinks, just a cup of fluid. In the fluid, there was an artificial sweetener, sucralose. Doesn't have any calories, but it tastes sweet. And there was 75 calories worth of sucralose. In other words, in 75 calories of glucose, the amount of sweetness was matched to this amount of sucralose. And so in this drink, you had sucralose as well as maltodextrose, which is not sensed in the mouth. It doesn't have any flavor, but in the gut and the intestines, it breaks down into glucose. And so you have this sort of mismatch concoction, this drink, which is fairly representative of substances that we ingest in the modern world. What happened? 75 calories for one of those drinks. Over 10 days, these individuals had 7 drinks. So 7 drinks over 10 days. At the end of those 7 days, those people had insulin resistance. Metabolically healthy in the beginning. No sign of insulin resistance. 10 days, 7 drinks, total of 7 drinks. They had insulin resistance because of this mismatch, this confusion of the brain and the nervous system. So this is the conversation. It's not calories. Calories is a very blunt, crude measure of a substance. It's the amount of heat that is generated when we burn that substance. Again, we are far more than a furnace or something that is burning the food that we eat. Food does contain fuel. That's part of it. But food is information. Sound crazy? there's a tremendous amount of information in food. Going to get into some physics here, some quantum mechanics even, but bear it out. This works. So in laws of thermodynamics, there is this property called entropy. And entropy, in a very basic level, can be defined as a measure of order. The higher the entropy, the lower the order. The lower the entropy, the higher the order. Now, let me back up. What do we get from the sun? Fair question. Most often, people will answer that question with the response of energy. What do we get from the sun? We get energy. But did you know that the Earth emits the same amount of energy that it absorbs from the sun? In other words, there's a balance. The same amount of energy the Earth and all of its beings absorbs from the sun, the same amount of energy is emitted or radiated into space. So very clearly, that's not an adequate answer to the question, what do we get from the sun? I think the best answer is, what do we get from the sun? Low entropy energy. In other words, the sun is an amazing source of low entropy, and all of the biological processes on Earth, life, all the energy systems involve the transfer and transformation of energy and either the increase or decrease of entropy. So, for example, photons, the sun light, radiation. Plants have the capacity, very sophisticated machinery, to capture that energy and that low entropy and to convert it into chemical bonds, say, for instance, in glucose or fructose with fruit. So it's taking low entropy, and in the food chain, from basic plants to animals all the way up the food chain, really what you see, in large part, is, yes, throughout that chain, energy is emitted, but entropy many times decreases. For example, cows, the ruminants, they eat grass, basic plant life. But what they do with those basic elements in that grass is pretty astonishing. They very much decrease the entropy in all of those things in the grass. They increase the order. Example is the amino acids, and proteins are made of amino acids. The amino acids in those plants, the cow takes in its digestive system in combination with bacteria, amazing synergistic system, symbiotic system. They actually increase the order and make amino acids that are more complicated. They have less entropy, higher order, or higher information. We, of course, eat the cows. So it's an actual, through that food chain leading up to us, in the case where cows are involved, it's a decrease in entropy, increase in order, increase in information. Among the physicists who study and discuss these types of things, they will very often connect entropy to this idea of information. The higher the entropy, or the more disordered a substance or a state is, the lower the information. The lower the entropy, or the higher the order something is, the more the information. Sort of a practical example of this, think of DNA. In all the cells, just about all the cells of our bodies, we have chromosomes. That's where our genetic material is held and stored and used as DNA. And it's a very repetitive order code. And in the chromosomes, there is very low entropy, very high order, and tons of information. This is a very practical example of this concept. In the natural world, biological world, where very low entropy, is associated with high order and high information. So this idea of information, it's actually used in quantum mechanics to talk about entropy. So for the longest time, my whole life and far before that, the focus, the paradigm that we've all been functioning on in speaking of a person's weight, problems of obesity, overnutrition, health, longevity, it's a focus on the first law of thermodynamics, which focuses on conservation of energy. In other words, if a person eats more energy than they use, they're going to gain weight. If they consume less energy than they use, they're going to lose weight. This is just the backbone of the way we think. And it's really the dogma behind everything, just about. Well, it's the wrong law. It's misdirection. We've been focusing on the wrong law of thermodynamics. Truth is, the answers are to be found in the second law of thermodynamics, which is relating to entropy, that in a natural state, in a closed system, entropy increases, order decreases. And we can relate to this. All of us are going to die. Our bodies will be disintegrated, degenerated, and become dirt, essentially. That is entropy. It's inevitable. And this is what the second law of thermodynamics deals with. Well, these diseases, obesity, diabetes, all these metabolic diseases, they result from the consumption of high entropy substances. Low order, high entropy, low information substances. This is what the food industry does. They take natural substances, semi-natural substances, they process them into foods that we like, Haagen-Dazs bars or Oreos or whatever it is, pizza. The engineering in the food industry is very sophisticated, very impressive, but ultimately, at every step of the way, ultimately what's happening is they're increasing the entropy of that substance. It is becoming less ordered. And we consume that. Our brain, our nervous system cannot interpret that information appropriately, and it leads to problems of communication within the body, between gut and the brain and every organ and tissue in the body. This is the fundamental problem, the fundamental driver of obesity, diabetes. It's entropy, high entropy food. Another analogy for you. Say that we compare, say my personal effort to live a long time, be healthy, avoid chronic disease, and to live a healthy life. Compare that to writing a book. Say I compare it to writing a 500-page book. Now, writing a book involves putting together words. I speak English, so words in English which are composed of letters. It's a pretty complicated process. But imagine that we see this and we say, okay, we're going to write a book. It's filled with letters and words. Or it's just filled with letters. So to write a book, I'm just going to put random English letters together that fill 500 pages. Total random. Have I achieved a book that makes sense and reads and is logical or sensible or has any coherent concepts, ideas? No. It's the same thing with food. Recently, there was an article published in JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, very prestigious, respected journal. The authors of this article set out to answer the question, can a person eat a healthy diet from a menu that is entirely ultra-processed foods? In other words, choosing only from processed, ultra-processed foods, can a menu be created that is actually healthy? And they concluded, yes, that you sit down, you look at what a human being needs. Okay, you need amino acids, you need fatty acids, you need vitamins, you need minerals, these micronutrients. Make this huge list. You know what? We can create a conglomeration of processed foods that covers all of our bases. And I back up and I think that's totally incorrect. That is so wrong, and that is fundamental to our problem in modern medicine and nutrition. We're missing it. It's not a set of boxes that we're checking. It's information. It's low entropy. It's eating things from the natural world. Those are the things that our bodies recognize and can process in a healthy way. In that food, it's not just fuel that we burn, but it's information, including information for the body as to how to process, how to metabolize that substance. In other words, that fuel comes with instructions, and we've completely obliterated the instructions in our modern diet. So ultimately what's happening here, a person can eat a lot of food, and if it's processed, ultra-processed, unnatural food, it doesn't register with the brain, and the brain ultimately perceives that the person has not eaten the appropriate amount. And so the message sent out in the nervous system is that a person is starving. And so people don't feel satisfied, that their mind is focused on food and finding food and consuming food. You get the idea. There's a detached reality there because the language of the human body is natural food. We cannot recreate that in a warehouse or a food manufacturing facility. We can't do it. It's too complicated for us. So what's the answer? Ultimately, it is to stay away from processed foods. Every step of the way, when modern man processes a food, they're going to increase the entropy. They're going to almost always do something, some modification of that substance to bring you back to that substance. They want you to eat it again and again, and that engages a specific part of the nervous system, the dopamine reward system. But stay away from processed foods. Now, we have this weird thing where this engineering in the food industry is so sophisticated, it's so impressive, that exposure to it can change the nervous system in such a way that a person's always going to be hypersensitive to certain types of foods, carbohydrates, processed foods. And so the safest way in our modern world, I believe, is a low-carb, animal-based diet. High information, high order, low entropy. This is, I believe, the safest way to avoid the chronic diseases that are killing us. So, something to think about. Thank you for joining me today. This is Idaho BMI. I'm David Brown. If you like this content, hit the subscribe button or the like button. We'll have more coming your way very soon.